Kings and generals, Pompeian, Parthian invasions of Rome, post-Caesar civil wars. Let's go.
In the previous episode of this series, we followed Octavian in the west, from the end of Philippi in 42 BC through the Parisine War until the Treaty of Brundisium in late 40 BC. At the same time, however, events were transpiring in the east, and in this episode, we shall again begin in the immediate aftermath of Philippi, this time focusing on Mark Antony and Cleopatra, and the eventual Pompeian Parthian invasion, which was a harbinger of what was to come for the next centuries of Roman history. Following the division of lands and legions that occurred after Philippi, Octavian returned to Italy, while Antony briefly wintered in Athens, enjoying the literary and philosophical pleasures of the city before crossing to Asia Minor in the spring of 41 BC. Much of the area had sworn allegiance to Brutus and Cassius, and it was up to Antony to re-establish control over these provinces, as well as collect the funds to cover the triumvir's colossal expenses.
Yeah, because this is one of the richest provinces, right?
Such as many of the Ionian cities, a heavy tribute of 9 years' worth of taxes was demanded. Kings, tyrants, and vassals who had sided against him were replaced with pro-Caesarians. Powerful Romans, such as governors, came to him asking for mercy, Antony sparing most of these, except any that had been involved in or knew about the conspiracy to assassinate Caesar.
Nice, just tying up those loose ends.
Antony was also careful to reward those who had remained loyal. The Rhodians, for example, were given more land, and he exempted the Lycians from taxes. It was a rare insight into how talented an administrator Antony could be, using threats and mercy in equal measure to quickly bring many of the eastern provinces back into the fold.
Nice, good traits of a politician.
During his journey around the provinces of Asia Minor, Antony was already planning for an invasion of Parthia, an invasion for which Egypt, Rome's most powerful vassal in the east, would be vital. As such, he requested that Cleopatra meet him in Cilicia. It is unlikely that this was the first time the two had met, as Antony had probably met Cleopatra when she lived in Rome for a time as Caesar's lover. However, it was apparently at this meeting that Antony, like Caesar before him, fell for Cleopatra's wit and beauty. Antony spent the summer in Syria, replacing tyrants and nobles who had sided with the liberators with pro-Caesarians, many of the deposed men fleeing to Parthia. Once this administration was handled, Antony travelled to Alexandria to spend the winter with his new lover, Cleopatra.
Like we saw from the last episode.
As he had in Athens, Antony spent his time in Alexandria frequenting schools, temples, and other places of learning, enjoying and embracing the Greek style of dress and way of life. He also spent a lot of time with Cleopatra, which eventually resulted in twins, Alexander and Cleopatra.
Oh, really?
His affinity for the Greek lifestyle and affair with Cleopatra would later be scorned by ancient historians. Appian wrote that he cared less and less for Roman affairs, obliging every one of Cleopatra's demands. Cassius Dio referred to Antony as Cleopatra's slave, and Plutarch wrote that Cleopatra dissipated and destroyed what good and saving qualities Antony had.
Now, is that just because they didn't like the fact that a woman had power, so they're sort of tarnishing her name there? Or was that the actual case? That's what we need to consider there.
These assessments are damning, but it is important to note that Roman sources such as these were almost uniformly scathing of powerful women,
exactly
and
what
also
I've just said.
by later Augustan propaganda. Whether such claims about their relationship are true or not is impossible to say with certainty, but the alliance between the triumvir and queen was at least initially beneficial to both parties. On the one hand, Antony benefited from making sure that he had a strong Egyptian ally that he could rely upon for supplies and logistics to support his Parthian campaign.
Which is key, because Egypt provided so much grain
to further her own position and remove her rivals, notably having her sister Arsinoe killed on Antony's orders. It was while Antony was in Alexandria, sometime in early 40 BC, that the Parthians began raiding Syria, led by Quintus Labienus, son of the renowned Titus Labienus, and the Parthian prince Pacorus. The precise size of the army is hard to distinguish, but it is hinted at being approximately 20,000, consisting of a mix of cataphracts and horse archers.
So not a massive
Ventidius
force.
Saxa, the governor Antony had appointed to the province, quickly gathered an army, likely around 2 legions, to fight the invaders, but was easily defeated in open battle by the more numerous Parthians and their excellent cavalry, with the Roman eagles being captured. Saxa fled
Oh
to
no, the
Antioch
standards got
and then
captured as
Cilicia,
well.
but was soon caught and executed. Despite Antony's efforts in the east, there were still many Pompeian sympathizers, particularly in Syria, which had previously been Cassius's province. Moreover, Quintus Labienus's father had been an incredibly popular Pompeian military leader.
Shit,
and the Parthians
what is
brought
Antony
with them
going to do
a
to
number
deal
of
with
the
this then?
Pompeians Antony had deposed. As a result, with Saxa dead, many garrisons and cities in Syria welcomed Quintus, surrendering without a fight, including Antioch. The force then split, Labienus pushing into Cilicia and Asia Minor, while Pacorus focused on subjugating the rest of Syria.
Okay.
With next to no resistance, he was able to seize control of almost the entire province, save for the notoriously well-defended city of Tyre, and pushed on to the Roman tributary of Judea, installing the anti-Roman Antigonus II as king. Labienus, meanwhile, was able to win over many cities in Cilicia, only facing serious resistance from Mylassa and Alabanda,
Shit.
both of which
Antony's
repelled
got some
initial
problems
attacks
over here, isn't he?
before eventually being taken and sacked. All of this had taken place in only a matter of months.
Only a matter of months. Peak.
Antony had thus far failed to act, either due to laziness and being too distracted by the luxuries of Alexandria, as Cassius Dio says,
Yeah.
or because the Parthians had moved too fast for Antony to muster a concerted response. Either way, it wasn't until spring that he sailed from Alexandria to Tyre to address the issue.
And then
However,
how's he going to
it
deal
was
with
at this
this
point
then?
that he received news of his brother and wife's defeat in Italy, and of the loss of Gaul to Octavian. With his political position in jeopardy, Antony rushed back to Italy with the majority of his legions,
So obviously we saw that from the last episode, but I'm quite surprised that he left the East in such a dire situation to go back to Rome.
abandoning the eastern provinces. Their absence allowed Labienus to make even greater gains, pushing through the southern coast of Asia Minor to Ionia. Even Mithridates VI, one of the great enemies of Rome, had not been so successful. Despite
Not good for
Octavian
the
and
Romans.
Antony managing to reconcile with the Treaty of Brundisium and Antony's marriage to Octavia, Sextus Pompey still presented a problem. The piracy and blockades of his fleet continued, and so did the famines. While Antony and Octavian were in Rome, the people, now at a breaking point, rioted in the Forum. Octavian, attempting
That
to
wasn't
calm the
covered in
crowd,
last
was
episode.
pelted with stones and attacked.
Really?
forcing Antony to
Shit.
intervene, bringing soldiers into the Forum. The soldiers held back the crowd, but also killed some of the civilians, triggering a panic that resulted in the deaths of even more. It was clear that this could not continue.
They're going to have to
To
take
prepare for
Sextus
peace
Pompey
talks,
out.
Octavian married Scribonia, the sister of Libo, one of Sextus's closest advisors. It was Libo who had facilitated the earlier alliance between Antony and Sextus, and he was once again vital, arranging a meeting of the three in Misenum at the start of 39 BC.
Okay.
The negotiations started off poorly, Sextus assuming he would be offered a place in the triumvirate instead of Lepidus, which Antony and Octavian flatly refused.
Yeah, flatly
The
refused.
negotiations continued, Antony and Octavian agreeing to forgive any who had been proscribed and to return part of their property to them. Many in Sextus's camp had been proscribed, and upon hearing this, they immediately jumped at the chance, pressuring Sextus to accept. Sextus had
Okay.
hoped to draw out negotiations, knowing that the famine put him in a powerful position that would only become stronger the longer he waited.
Just wasting people's
Under the
lives
mounting
like they're
pressure from
bargaining
his own
chips,
faction,
though.
though, Sextus was forced to make peace quickly. The trio had agreed to the following. Sextus
Just going to read this quickly. So, Pompey ceases the blockade of Italy. Pompey removes all his troops from Italy. Pompey immediately sends grain supplies to Rome, and in return, the proscribed Pompeians are allowed to return to Rome and are given a quarter of their property. Slaves who joined Pompey's armies will be freed and paid in full upon completing their military services. Okay.
Cease his blockades and
That's
piracy,
fair.
remove any troops he still had in continental Italy, and immediately send grain to Rome. In return, the proscribed Pompeians would be allowed to return to Rome and have 1/4 of their property restored. The many slaves that Sextus had welcomed into his army would be freed and rewarded fully upon completing their term of military service.
I mean, I think that's fair.
And finally, Sextus would be allowed to govern Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and Achaia. The treaty was sealed by another marriage, Sextus's daughter Pompeia to Octavian's nephew Marcellus, the son-in-law of Antony.
Okay, shit. Marriages really solidifying deals here, as they always do in the history.
It was a relatively poor deal. He already had effective control of Sicily, Sardinia, and with his naval supremacy, likely could have taken Corsica with ease.
Yeah, but if you're looking to just have control over those three places, then surely it's better to have it with the defense of the Roman Empire behind you, though, right? Yeah, you got to make a few concessions, but they're not going to bother you too much, right?
The only real benefit he got
or is that just me being naive?
Sextus was well aware of this and was furious at the advisors who had pressured him to accept, rather than allowing him to wait for better terms. Part of his faction even suggested that he act now and kill both Octavian and Antony, but Sextus refused. Meanwhile, Octavian and Antony had benefited from the treaty massively. The recalling of Sextus's ships and the grain he sent quickly ended the famine, and the two triumvirs returned to a hero's welcome in Rome.
Nice.
With affairs in Italy settled for now, Antony had quartered himself in Athens, simultaneously monitoring affairs in Italy and mustering his forces for a huge counter-invasion of Parthia, selecting his general Ventidius to
Antony's going to try and deal with this eastern province situation now then.
This was the same Ventidius that had been in Italy while Lucius Antony was besieged in Perusia and had not come to his aid. He was a novus homo, a new man, who had started as a mule driver before joining the army and serving under Caesar in Gaul. Little else is known about his early life, but he seems to have caught Caesar's eye, as he was assigned as a praetor by the dictator in 43 BC.
Strong.
Since Caesar's assassination, he had also proved himself loyal to Antony, and was one of the men Antony relied upon in the lead-up to Mutina years earlier.
Maybe not.
He had held military commands, but never had control over a full campaign, as he now did. The fact that Antony, a sound military strategist, entrusted command to him shows not only the level of trust Antony had in Ventidius, but perhaps also that Ventidius had correctly done what Antony would have wanted by not supporting Lucius.
Also just showing that he's got military
At the start
prowess.
of spring 39 BC, Ventidius crossed into Asia Minor with a force of probably 4 legions, alongside a sizable number of light infantry, aiming to establish a foothold for Antony. Though Labienus had moved quickly and seized a lot of land, he had thus far not been able to consolidate his position and had distanced himself significantly from his Parthian allies in Syria.
So he's got no supply lines, right?
Were local auxiliaries who had sided with him and perhaps 2 legions from Syria. Confronted with Ventidius's larger force, Labienus had little option but to retreat back to Cilicia to try and join forces with a portion of the Parthian force in Syria.
Also, just get back to
his army
his supply
and
lines.
leading the light infantry and cavalry ahead to try and cut off Labienus. Ventidius was able to overtake Labienus around the Taurus Mountains,
Really?
camping on the high ground.
Nice.
Ventidius was hesitant to attack with only his light infantry, and so a standoff ensued, Ventidius waiting for his heavy infantry and Labienus for his Parthian allies. This carried on for almost a week, until the reinforcements for both sides arrived apparently on the same day. Ventidius kept his entire force on the high ground, but the reinforcing Parthians, buoyed by their victory over Saxa the previous year, did not wait to coordinate an attack with Labienus, forming up at the base of the hill for battle. The standard Roman military doctrine was to draw up for battle in front of an encampment so as not to be surrounded, as can be seen from Caesar's tactics at Sella, for instance. Ventidius, though, kept his force in camp. Encouraged by this perceived cowardice, the Parthians began to charge up the incline.
They're going to waste their energy, right?
Up the slope, however, Ventidius suddenly ordered his men to sally out and attack. caught unawares and fighting uphill, the Parthian cavalry stood little chance
What
against
fools?
the heavy Roman infantry, and many were killed before quickly routing. The stampede of horses downhill caused even more casualties, and the Parthians fled the field completely, leaving Labienus and his men deployed in battle formation outside their camp.
Labienus is
Ventidius
fucked, right?
marshaled his forces once again, but did not attack Labienus.
Oh, that's
The latter had
interesting.
been relying upon the Parthians for the battle, and with them routed, it is peculiar that Ventidius did not press
Yeah,
home
what
his
is
advantage,
Ventidius doing?
though he may have wanted to avoid exhausting his men, or perhaps attempted to negotiate with Labienus to surrender. Whichever the reason, both forces returned to their encampments for the night. At this point,
Labienus has to
slip
run.
away in the darkness, but deserters from his camp informed Ventidius of this. He quickly took action, ambushing Labienus's retreating force in the night, killing a number of them and capturing the rest. What exactly happened to Labienus next is unclear. Cassius says he was able to slip away, but was soon arrested and executed, while Festus claims he was killed in the ambush. Whichever the case, it is clear that Ventidius had won an impressive victory, thus securing Asia Minor.
Yeah, Lepidinus,
In order to
Lepidus
safeguard
needed to
Cilicia
die there.
against any counterattack, Ventidius marched his force to the Amanus Pass, bordering Syria. Finding it garrisoned by the Parthians, Ventidius had 2 legions wait in ambush, while he sent a force of cavalry ahead to provoke the Parthians.
Nice.
The Roman cavalry feigned a retreat, luring the Parthians directly into Ventidius's trap. The legions sprung to the attack, killing many Parthians, including their commander, and routing the rest.
Fools.
Upon hearing news of their second defeat, Pacorus, the Parthian prince, withdrew the remainder of his forces from Syria. Ventidius was thus able to retake the remainder of the province without a fight.
Nice, he was able to
Began
do it
the
himself
process of
without even
re-administering
Antony
the
there.
provinces,
I bet
including
Antony's
sending
happy
a
as
small
well.
detachment of his force to Herod, the Roman-supported son of the deposed king of Judea, in order to try and retake the kingdom from the Parthian-installed Antigonus. The Parthian invasion had only been stalled, though. It had not been completely halted. At the start of the following year, 38 BC, Pacorus began amassing a second invasion force, totaling between 20
Is this
and
going to be the
30,000
issue? Yeah, it's a
soldiers.
larger force.
At this time, Ventidius's legions were still in their winter quarters, and some in Cappadocia. According to Cassius Dio, in order to buy himself more time, Ventidius used a local prince who was known to be close to the Parthians to spread disinformation.
Ooh, smart. I
The
like
prince
that
claimed
idea.
that Ventidius was not afraid of the Parthians crossing the Euphrates in their usual place near Zeugma, saying that the legions would easily be able to hold the crossing thanks to the hilly terrain, but that he was worried about the Parthians crossing further down the river, where the flat plains would make it difficult for his men to fight the Parthian cavalry.
Making them
Pacorus, as a
think to
result
go
of
that
this,
way.
aimed for the flat plains, wasting as many as 40
You fool of
days
a
marching
toque!
his army downstream and building a bridge. This was enough time for Ventidius to muster his forces and be prepared for the invasion. Though this is the version of events given by Cassius Dio, some modern historians have questioned it. They point out justifiably that our only source for the events is Roman, and thus would have an undeniable bias against the Parthians, depicting
Very
them as
true.
gullible and easily fooled.
Very
Pacorus was a
true.
talented commander, and some therefore think it is unlikely that he would have been so easily hoodwinked.
But why
It
did it
has
go
also
down
been
there then?
suggested
Let
that
me know what you
Pacorus
think in the
deliberately
comments box down
waited
below.
for Ventidius to amass his legions in order to be able to hopefully strike one decisive blow and destroy the Roman army in the east in one battle. In either scenario, the outcome is the same. Ventidius had enough time to gather his army to counter Pacorus.
Nice. Ventidius showing
The
his
forces
worth in
met
these
around
battles.
Mount Gindaris,
What a great
Ventidius
general.
once again encamping on the high ground. His army of perhaps 4 legions plus light infantry was approximately the same size as Pacorus's, but since his victories the previous year, Ventidius had also incorporated slingers into his army,
Nice.
likely from local populations.
I was about to say that looks
When
like them in the
Parthians
back
drew up
row
for
there.
battle, Ventidius once again used the same ploy as before, keeping his army inside their camp to lure the Parthians close. The Parthian horse archers advanced up the slope first, and Ventidius waited
He's
until
just
the
saying,
last
if you want
moment
the
to
battle,
unleash
come get
Parthian's
it.
force. Some of the Parthians were caught by this sally and cut down, the remainder retreating past the Roman fort with part of Ventidius's force in pursuit.
Okay.
Pacorus, assuming that his horse archers had lured out the entirety of Ventidius's army, now advanced uphill towards the camp with his cataphracts.
Really?
Suddenly,
You
Ventidius
thought the
attacked
whole
with the
force
remainder
come
of
out?
his legions and slingers. With the advantage of the high ground, they were able to easily blunt the charge of the cataphracts and
There's
propel
no
them, forcing
way.
them back down the hill. Pacorus
There's no way he thought his whole force chased after just the vanguard horse archers. Like, what do you think? What? Do you really think you're going to commit a whole force just to your vanguard and then leave your encampment? Nah, that just seems
was
stupid,
able to rally his
idiotic
men at the
to
base of
me.
the hill and organized a proper resistance. The Parthians, however, found themselves under a hail of missiles from the Roman slingers on the high ground, and Pacorus was killed in the fighting.
Ha!
Some of his
Pink!
guard fought fiercely for his body, but a combination of Roman heavy infantry and intense fire from the slingers
Imagine getting
proved
taken
too
out by
much,
stones,
the
man.
Parthian army breaking completely.
Pathetic. Mate.
Parts of the army attempted to flee back across the Euphrates, but were cut off and killed. Others successfully managing to reach the safety of Commagene, a Parthian ally.
Mate,
The
Ventidius
majority of
is
the
just
Parthian
putting
army,
in work.
however, had been killed. Ventidius's casualties are unknown, but they seem to have been minimal, as he immediately marched to Commagene and besieged the capital.
Ha! Mate,
Antony
he's
arrived
Donny.
in Greece
He's
soon
a
afterwards,
Donny.
taking over the siege and accepting tribute from the Commagene king in return for peace. Antony seems to have been somewhat jealous of Ventidius's achievements, and not without reason. Ventidius had won 3 battles in succession, including Rome's first victory over a full Parthian army, and the death of Pacorus sparked a succession crisis in Parthia, further securing Rome's eastern border. Antony removed
Strong.
the general from command, and Ventidius returned to Rome a hero, becoming the first Roman to be awarded a triumph for a victory over the Parthians. Ventidius
Strong.
then disappears from the historical record, the assumption being that he died soon afterwards, though whether by natural causes or not is unknown.
It was the Roman Empire. I think he was killed. What do you think?
The death of Quintus Labienus meant that there was effectively only one Pompeian leader left, Sextus Pompey. And while Ventidius had been securing the east, the peace that had been agreed at Misenum had frayed quickly. While Antony was in Athens, Sextus had requested control of the province of Achaia as agreed. In return, Antony demanded the tax revenue of the province in order to fund his Parthian campaign, a demand that Sextus refused. To make matters worse for Sextus, one of his generals and governors, Menas, had defected to Octavian, handing over control of Sardinia and 3 legions. In response,
it's not
Sextus
going
had
well for
once again
Sextus.
sent out his fleet to pirate the Mediterranean, and by the start of 38 BC, the peace was in tatters. War, once again, loomed on the horizon. We shall cover this war between the Caesarians and Sextus Pompey in the upcoming episode.
Well.
So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it.
You know I'm subscribed and I've got that bell icon. I hope you guys have as well. If you haven't, head over to their page. That link's in the description box down below. Check their content out for yourself. If you enjoyed my reaction, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But I will catch you in the next video.